The deep ocean has fascinated people for thousands of years. I'm Frank Howarth and I'm Director of the Australian Museum. In these short videos we want to tell you something about the preparations for our very own Deep Oceans exhibition. I'm with Dr. Penny Berents, Head of Natural Sciences at the Australian Museum. Tell me, Penny, what sort of deep oceans research or things does the Australian Museum get involved in?
In recent years, the Australian Museum has been involved in a number of major collaborative international deep sea expeditions. Working in the deep sea is very expensive. It involves big ships, lots of money. So the best way to do this is in collaboration with other organisations. And we've been lucky to be involved in a number of these collaborative expeditions in the last 10 to 20 years. In particular, one really exciting one that I was very lucky to be on is known as Norfans. And it's known as Norfans because it was a survey of the Norfolk Ridge, and it was conducted by Australian and New Zealand scientists. So that was all combined to call it Norfans. The expedition left New Zealand and steamed up the Norfolk Ridge, which is an underwater mountain range heading north from New Zealand, sampled all the way up the Norfolk Ridge, then went across to Lord Howe, worked on
what sort of ocean depths are we talking about, Penny?
Anything from 100 metres to 1,500 metres. Oh. Working on seamounts and the slope, because the sea floor, this is one of the messages of the exhibition, the sea floor is not just a plain of mud. There's mountain ranges, there's chasms, there's canyons. It's as much an exciting landscape as you see on land. So we did this big expedition, worked on Lord Howe Rise, went back to New Zealand. So this expedition worked over about a period of about 1 month, made fantastic collections using trawls, sledges, dredges, taking camera shots, using multi-beam sonar to give good pictures of the bottom of the ocean, and make extensive collections which are now held in our museum, Museum Victoria, and museums in New Zealand.
Penny, how did we then take the sort of science we know about the deep oceans and involve it in the exhibition?
That's where one of my roles in the whole exhibition team has been to be a conduit between research and collections, all our scientists in research and collections in my division, and the exhibition team. So my role has been to know who's got what expertise amongst our scientists, how to balance their exhibition input with their other work demands, and know what sort of collection items are going to make good stories for the exhibition, which sort of things are good to display as specimens, which our specimens really are better as photographs, and just generally be a conduit between the expertise that sits in our research and collections division and the input that's needed to develop the exhibition.
Can you tell me about any specific specimens that captured your imagination as we were preparing for the exhibition?
I think one of the interesting, people know about the big things, the giant squids, and people know the stories about whale carcasses and all of that. The hard message to get across is the diversity of invertebrates, and these fantastic, often quite small animals, which make up most of the biodiversity, are small and they don't preserve very well, so it's hard to prepare them in ways that is good for exhibitions. So we've tried to do that, as well as feature all the things that people expect to see, like deep sea squids and all those sorts of things.
And by invertebrates you mean what sort of animals?
All those animals that don't have a backbone, so lots of crabs and prawns and worms and corals. There's lots of corals in the deep sea. That's something that people don't generally know about, so we've tried to explain all the different sorts of animals that live in the deep sea. Also explain that there's so much more to find out, that there's so much we don't know.